Hello everyone and welcome to Epilepsy Research UK's Research Roundtable on participating in research. My name is Andrew People. I'm a journalist and host of the Asia Matters podcast, and I'll be your host for this session. Well, we have a fantastic lineup of speakers this afternoon. We'll be hearing from Emma and Daisy from the MICE PPI group. Emma is the mum of a 15-year-old daughter who was diagnosed with epilepsy when she was 3. She is the PPI lead for the Mental Health Intervention for Children with Epilepsy. That's the MICE acronym project. Daisy is a student nurse living with a number of chronic health conditions, including epilepsy. She was diagnosed with epilepsy in 2012. Daisy is also a PPI member for the MICE project. So both Daisy and Emma will be joined by Amy Lewins, who also from the project. Amy is a research assistant and assistant psychologist at the UCL Great Ormond Street Institute of Child Health. Later, we will hear from Beck Hanley, who is an expert in patient and public involvement in charities and facilitates the Charities Research Involvement Group. And finally, we'll hear from Bethan Davis from the autism research charity Autistica. Bethan oversees Austica's PPI groups and will be describing what their program of PPI work looks like in practice. Following their talks, we'll have a Q&A session where our panelists will answer questions submitted by viewers, researchers, and the Epilepsy Research UK team. Well, just before we hear from our speakers, we're going to speak a little bit about the SHAPE Epilepsy Research Network and share some of the latest statistics with you. Many of you watching will already be aware that last year, as part of the A Life Interrupted campaign, Epilepsy Research UK launched the SHAPE network. Through this network, they aim to build the biggest community of people affected by epilepsy to provide an opportunity for people affected to have their say in the future of research. So if you or someone you know is affected by epilepsy, your involvement today is vital in helping us unlock further progress. Your involvement will help us build relationships that will result in greater investment. Your involvement will help us gather the evidence we need to call on the government to do more. And your involvement will speed up progress to stop the interruptions epilepsy has on so many lives. So if your life has been interrupted by epilepsy, please consider joining our SHAPE network to shape the future of epilepsy research. Well, joining us now to share the most recent statistics from the SHAPE network is Akanksha Jain. Akanksha is a PhD student at the University of Edinburgh and has been with Epilepsy Research UK for the last 6 months on an East Bio professional internship for PhD students. The main part of her time with the charity has been to analyse the questionnaire responses from the SHAPE network members. Akanksha has the latest statistics to share with us now. So over to you, and let's hear those statistics. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Andrew, for introducing me. So as Andrew has already mentioned, the SHAPE Epilepsy Network brings together people affected by epilepsy. And as part of the network, we asked people 4 main questions through which people could share their impact of epilepsy on their lives and also help plan which areas of future research should focus on in epilepsy. And so far, as you can see, we've had over 300 responses, and each of them being so insightful into the condition of epilepsy. I have been going through each of the responses, analyzing and kind of accumulating the data to understand what people with epilepsy, affected by epilepsy, want to see. So the first 2 questions focused on how epilepsy interrupted people's life and what kind of thing would be life-changing for them. So we asked people how epilepsy has interrupted their lives. And the second thing that we asked people is what kind of things they would like to see in the future of epilepsy research. So for the first question, when we asked people how epilepsy interrupted their lives, not surprisingly, epilepsy interrupts all aspects of people's life. But the most popular answers were that people reported interruption to their career. That could be what kind of jobs they were allowed to do, or even facing, in some cases, workplace stigma. People also said interruptions to their daily lives, and even simple things that we associate with daily lives like driving is also interrupted. And as you can really imagine, that all of this can really affect someone's independence, and that can really and as you can see, that it is very easy that how this can spiral down, leading to other health problems. So in fact, over 1/4 of participants said epilepsy interrupted their lives by impacting their mental health and causing a loss of confidence. When we asked what one thing could be life-changing for people, 1/3 of participants said better medications with fewer side effects would be most beneficial to them. People also said being completely seizure-free and able to do day-to-day activities such as driving, sleeping, even going for a walk would be life-changing for them. Then we asked people which areas that they think should be the focus of future epilepsy research. And interestingly, the answers to this question really resonated the answers to the previous question. People reported over 50% of participants reported reduced side effects from drugs, new improved treatment options, and more effective anti-epileptic drugs would be their main focus for future epilepsy research. And as you can see, the data really speaks for itself, and this is what people want to see in epilepsy research. And this is the data that we have directly got from people who are directly living with the condition today, and also from people, from parents and guardians who are directly affected by epilepsy by their children. Finally, we asked people what proportion of funds they think that should be given to Help for Today, which are clinical trials, and Hope for Tomorrow. And on average, people suggested that funding research should be allocated 50-50 between clinical research and basic scientific research. And I think what this really shows is that we need both clinical studies and basic scientific research today in order to move in a direction where one day we're free from epilepsy and seizures. And I think Andrew has already given you update on this, that if it is vital to join the SHAPE network, because you can really shape the future of research. Thank you, Andrew. Over to you now.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that with us, Akanksha. You're currently doing your PhD in neuroscience at the University of Edinburgh, as we said before, and working mostly in the lab there, I guess. So working with Epilepsy Research UK on this project must have been quite a change for you.
I think definitely, especially because I work with cells. So I'm working in the lab at a very early stage of scientific research. So I think especially then it can be really difficult to see when I'm working with cells, how that could be applied to real life, or the impact the work could have in the future. So I think really working with Epilepsy Research UK really showed me that, research can directly benefit the lives of people. It does take a long time, but at the end, one day it will. Thank you. Well,
that's a fantastic message, and thank you for the work you're doing, Akanksha, and thank you for that presentation. So, of course, as Akanksha said, if any of you watching are interested in sharing your views and joining the SHAPE network, please use the link at the end of this webinar. We also actually have a really exciting opportunity coming up for SHAPE network members. We'll shortly be recruiting for the SHAPE network steering group. So if you're interested in helping to shape the SHAPE network, then please do sign up to the network to be among the first to find out about this. Well, we're now going to hear from Emma and Daisy, from the Mice Study PPI group. And joining us to talk a bit about the impact of PPI and Amy Lewins, a researcher working on the study. So over to the three of you, and thank you for joining us again.
Thanks, Andrew. I'm going to go first. So I'm Emma. I'm the PPI lead for the Mice project. And my youngest daughter, who is now 15, was diagnosed with epilepsy just after her 3rd birthday. So we've been learning about epilepsy for just over 12 years now. But I'm going to talk to you a bit about how I became involved with research, because it was something I had never done before our daughter was diagnosed. So I used to do as much fundraising as I could when she was smaller, and for the epilepsy charities. And as a result of that, I was asked to attend a Young Epilepsy Award ceremony in 2015, I think it was. And I was sat at a table with Roz Shafran and Sophie Bennett, who are 2 of the project leads for the Mice project, as Sophie had won an award for something else. And they said, well, come along and join our research advisory group. And I said, okay, yeah, it sounds great. And I did, despite never having done anything like that before. And it was actually a pilot to show that the Mice project was needed. So I joined that research advisory group and really enjoyed it. And then in 2016, Roz approached me about being the PPI lead for the Mice project, which meant that I was a co-applicant on the funding application. So I said yes, even though I was slightly terrified. And it's been quite a learning curve, to be honest with you. Because it was a 5-year project, that's quite a big project in terms of funding allocation. And so there's loads of different co-applicants. So at those initial meetings, I've sat around the table with neurologists and psychiatrists, psychologists, statisticians, health economists. So it's been fascinating, and I learned a lot very quickly. But what's really important about that is that PPI has been a part of the project from the very beginning. So it wasn't something that was added on after the bid had been won, after the funding had been secured. It was integral to the whole project, which is really important, I think, for good PPI. So now we're in 2021 and the project's in its 4th year, and our PPI group has been more or less static through all of that. So they're so committed. They're fantastic. We've got 12 adults and 7 young people. The adults are mostly made up of parent carers. We have a grandparent. We have a young adult, Daisy, who will be speaking after me. And we meet quarterly, but initially for the first year, I think we met every 2 months. We always meet on Saturdays because that's really the only time that any of us can definitely guarantee. And when we were able to meet in person, we used to split up. So there would be a young person's group and the adult group, so that the young people could go off with researchers and just work on things that were more relevant and interesting, whilst the adult group kind of did the more talky stuff. And just to give you an idea of some of the things that we do, it's not an exhaustive list, but it's just a kind of flavour, really. So as a group, we help with plain English summaries. So anything that goes out, it needs to be easy to read, accessible language, so it's not too much jargon or medical things. We've helped with the epilepsy specific content of the treatment that's being trialled. We have advised researchers on the best way to recruit families to the trial itself. We've helped researchers devise ways to conduct interviews, both with young people and parent carers, and with the whole family together. We've created a frequently asked questions sheet and a roadmap of resources for people who are recently diagnosed. But I think overall, really what we do is we highlight the gaps in services and knowledge that families frequently experience when epilepsy has been diagnosed. And for me personally, so I've had some amazing opportunities come out of being the PPI lead, as a direct result of my role. So part of the application process, I had a funding budget written in. So I've been able to undertake funded postgraduate study because of the role. I have spoken at quite a lot of conferences now with the project leads and other researchers. I've been asked to help with recruitment panels. So I've sat and helped recruit new researchers to the project. I've contributed to some of the academic papers that are being published through each different work package. And actually, that in amongst our PPI group, several of us wrote a paper, which it was for an academic journal, but it didn't get through the peer review stage. But Epilepsy Research UK decided that what we had to say was quite important. So they put it in a blog, which I think is still available online. It was in October, it was published. And I just, more than all of those things, I think it's really important to stress the relationships that we have with the researchers, but also amongst ourselves. So the support across the PPI group is tremendous. We've worked together for 4 years now, and it's a really good bunch of people, and I count them amongst my friends. So it's a fabulous thing. Thanks, Andrew.
So I'm Daisy. I'm 19 and I was diagnosed with epilepsy when I was 10 years old. I joined the PPI group around a year ago, and honestly, I joined it because I wanted to be a participant, and I approached the research team asking to be a participant, and unfortunately my trust wasn't a site that was part of the mice trial. So Emma contacted me and wanted me to join the PPI group, so that's what I'm doing now. I'm quite new to the PPI group, so I've only actually been to 2 face-to-face. I've got more experience on Zoom, which is interesting. Every member of the PPI group have really different views, and we all have our own experiences, and we're all at different stages in our journey as such. So I find it really interesting seeing everyone's point of view, because all the kids are so different, and yeah, some of the people with epilepsy like me aren't kids anymore, so we provide that different perspective. Yeah, Zoom is challenging sometimes, but it works as well. It's a lot more convenient than having to travel to London, and it's got its benefits and its drawbacks, but we're managing at the minute. We're doing well. Amy?
Yeah, thank you guys for doing a really, really good job of explaining sort of what the PPI group does and giving a bit of background. I'm just going to share my screen and just kind of add on to what you've said, really, but just kind of give some context to what the MICE project is, and kind of how the PPI group have really helped to shape the research, as Emma said, sort of from inception all the way through to now, to the randomized control trial. So the MICE study is the mental health intervention for children with epilepsy study. And it's split into 4 different packages of work, as Emma kind of alluded to. So the first work package, the aim was to kind of develop a manual of cognitive behavioural therapy for children and young people with epilepsy who also have a mental health condition. In the second work package, we trialed out that intervention, and we did like an open trial and a feasibility study. And we're now in the third work package, which is a full sort of randomized control trial. And then the fourth work package refers to kind of the qualitative project, which is kind of the interview. So where we interview parents who have taken part and received the intervention and kind of find out how they found it. And the main aim of the whole project is to look into the effectiveness of the CBT for these children. And the whole idea of kind of the intervention we've developed is that hopefully it will be able to be integrated within existing epilepsy services. So we purposely kind of designed the therapy so that nurses, epilepsy nurses, assistant psychologists can all kind of deliver this therapy within the services that already exist. We thought that was really important. And so what we're doing is we are measuring results on the strengths and difficulties questionnaire at baseline, so at randomization, and then at 6 months sort of after randomization. And we're comparing those scores for children and young people who received the therapy to those who didn't receive the therapy. And then I've just wanted to sort of take you through just a couple of examples of where the PPI group have had a really, really big impact, and we've been really, really thankful to have them on board. I think Emma mentioned already that we asked for their help basically when we were developing work package 4, which was the interviews, and so to one of our meetings we took along the topic guide, which is kind of the script with all the questions, and we just kind of consulted the group on their take on it, and it was really, really helpful. I think it kind of illuminated some of the language that was perhaps over medicalized or perhaps stigmatizing in some ways that as researchers we hadn't thought of, and also some practical things that sort of came up where the group pointed out that there were some issues with the way that we were sort of planning to do the interviews, for example, kind of strictly doing them with all of the children and young people, and actually the members were really helpful in pointing out that that's not going to be realistic for everyone who has epilepsy, and that there are some people out there who have more complex needs. That means that wouldn't be able to happen. So I've just got a quote here from one of our researchers who works on work package 4. I'll just read it out. So when I was preparing to interview young participants in the MICE project and their families, we needed an insider's view on the questions we were planning to ask. The PPI group were generous with their time and provided precious inputs that helped shape our sampling decisions and the interview guide. Just thought that was a really nice quote. And then Emma's also kind of touched on this, so I won't speak too long about it, but it is something that is close to all of our hearts. So as Emma said, we attempted to publish a paper in a journal, in a sort of academic journal, which was all about sort of what the parents in the group would like clinicians to know. And so I think they did a fantastic job of writing a paper up with really sort of honest views of what they would like, clinicians to know for the future. But unfortunately, there were some criticisms at the peer review stage. And then I think a year sort of passed and we were wondering what to do with the paper. And we found Epilepsy Research UK, and we managed to publish it as a blog, which we were really, really, really happy about, because we know that Epilepsy Research UK has a wide readership of both sort of clinicians and families and people who have epilepsy. So yeah, we were very happy that was published there, and it's still available now, and I'm sure we can put the link somewhere for everyone to access it. Yeah, I think that was everything. Thank you, Andrew.
Well, thank you to all three of you. Thank you, Emma, Daisy, and Amy, for giving us those insights into how this does work in practice and how useful PPI is. Well, to explain a little bit more now about what patient and public involvement in research actually is and how it can benefit research, we have PPI expert Beck Hanley here. Over to you, Beck, please.
Thank you, Andrew, and thank you, Emma, Daisy, and Amy. I feel like you just illustrated the things that I'm going to talk about, so thank you very much for that. I'm just going to share my screen with you. And so before I start talking about how involvement in research adds value for charities, I just thought I would share with you some definitions of terms that get used quite often when you're in this field, because I think it can lead to lots of confusion. So I'm very sorry for putting a piece of pie or a photo of a piece of pie in front of you on a Friday afternoon. I feel like we should all be eating that and not be sitting in a webinar. But the reason is because the words that get used around this, if you put them together, they spell pie. But they mean different things to different people, but these are the definitions that are used mostly in the UK, and especially by the National Institute for Health Research. So that's the research arm of the NHS, and it's the thing that's used most. So definitions that are most commonly used in charities. So participation, that's about people taking part in research, being studied, having blood tests, taking part in randomized controlled trials. Engagement is what lots of researchers do really well. So they tell people about their research. They give TV interviews, or they write blogs, or they publish papers, or they go and give talks. But it's fairly a one-way process. So it's researchers telling people, but not necessarily listening to what people who are living with a condition have to say. Involvement is what I think we're talking about this afternoon, and it's about people having a say in the research process. So I hope you'll keep that in mind when I talk about just 5 ways that I think that people getting involved in research can really help research, especially for charities. So the first reason is that if people get involved in research, they can help charities like Epilepsy Research UK prioritise areas for research that are most important to people affected by a condition. So historically, it was researchers who decided what would get researched. But increasingly, charities are realising that other people should have a say. So that might be doctors and nurses, people who provide care, but it's also, importantly, people living with the condition. Because when you ask people what should be researched, they often say different things to what researchers say. And I've given you there, I'm not going to read it out, but I've given you an example there from the MS Society. But when the MS Society asked people living with MS what their big priority for research was, almost to a single person they said, help us deal with fatigue. And the MS Society at that point was not funding any research about fatigue. So it really helped them change the focus of their research and to really, as they've said, prioritise what they think they should be doing. Involvement can also help charities fund the most relevant research. So lots of charities, including Epilepsy Research, now include people living with a condition in deciding what they're going to fund. And the reason they do that is they say, we know where they're much more confident that we're funding research that's going to make a difference to people. And you'll see there's a nice quote there from a newly merged charity called Asthma UK and the British Lung Foundation. But it's not just that, it's also when you think about it, people who are living with a condition are usually the people who are raising money for research about that condition. So it increases the transparency and accountability of charities. So my number 3 reason, this I think is one of the most important reasons why patients, carers, people living with a condition need to get involved in research, and that's because they make research better. And Amy talked a bit about that at the end of that last presentation. So there's increasing research evidence that says if you involve people, you get better research. So you get research that's got a better design. It measures what's important to people. Patients and carers can really help researchers think about ethical issues. So what might be the ethical challenges around research? But maybe one of the most important things is lots of research fails because it doesn't manage to recruit enough people. So we waste in this country and around the world millions of pounds starting research projects that don't recruit enough people, so they can't produce reliable results. What we found is if you involve people living with a condition in designing the research and running the research, the recruitment is much better because they know what people like them are likely to agree to take part in and stay involved in. Amy talked about how people affected by epilepsy can help with getting better data collection, and they can also help with data analysis, and they can make sure that the results of research are shared and will be put into practice. So I'm sure Bethan's going to come back to this in her presentation about what Autistica do, but this is really important. We've got to get research as good as we can, and here's how people can help to do that. Another thing that Akanksha's already mentioned, so I love it that people have already mentioned these things, but if people affected by conditions get involved in research, they can help to motivate researchers to do their job better. And that's not just the case for clinical research, where researchers are direct contact with patients, but also in research that takes place in a lab. So Rachel Hughes is a young researcher doing some research that's funded by Parkinson's UK. And what she and many other lab-based researchers say is, if I meet people living with the condition I'm studying, it really reminds me of how important it is to do what I'm doing. And then lastly, but not least, and again, Daisy and Emma mentioned this, but involvement can help build the skills or the confidence of people with lived experience who get involved, and it can give hope for the future. So the role of health-based charities is all about improving the lives of people living with a condition, and involvement in research can help do that. And I've included some quotes here. One's from 10 of Us, which is a cancer care organisation based in Wales. And they talk about how people involved in their research advisory group have said how they get such a sense of empowerment from being involved in research, and how it helps to come up against or change some of the experiences they had in giving treatment. And then Kathy Bazeos is someone who lives with arthritis, who talks about how getting involved in research has given her hope, not necessarily but for her, but for people who may follow her. And then Kathy Gill, another Kathy, has talked about how she feels she and her husband, who lives with Alzheimer's, have benefited from getting involved and feeling that sense of community that Emma talked about earlier. So I'm just going to finish just showing you, if you're interested in this, Akanksha's mentioned the Shape Epilepsy Research Network, but if you want to look at some broader resources, here's a couple of things from the NIHR, National Institute for Health Research, one aimed at researchers called Briefing Notes for Researchers, and then one aimed at people who want to get involved, just called How to Get Involved. And if you're taking part in this webinar and you're a lab-based researcher, I'd really encourage you to look at this guidance on involvement in lab-based research, because it talks about that. Thanks, Andrew. I'm going to stop there.
Well, thank you so much, Beck, for giving us that explanation, really, of some of the thoughts and the concepts behind PPI. It's so important. It's such a simple concept in many ways, it seems, to bring researchers and people living with conditions like epilepsy together more to work on research. So thank you so much for that, Beck. Well, finally now we'll be hearing from Bethan Davis. Bethan's from Autistica, as we mentioned before, and she's going to explain how PPI works in practice with Autistica. Thank you so much, Bethan. Thank you for joining us, and over to you.
Brilliant. Let me just share my screen. That'll work. Yeah. So as Andrew said, I am Engagement and Events Manager at Autistica. And I'm just going to really quite quickly show kind of some of the PPI we do at Autistica. And hopefully this works quite nicely with Beck's, because hopefully it kind of illustrates all the theory and stuff that Beck said kind of in practice, hopefully. So, find my mouse. Cool. So to start off with, this is kind of where we started in Autistica kind of 5-7 years ago. I don't remember how long now. And we kind of looked at what research in autism was looking at, what it was addressing, and where it was roughly going. So we worked with the James Lind Alliance to kind of get the autistic priorities from autistic people. And we got the list there, which are the 10 research priorities that autistic people have said that they wanted research in. And on the other side of the page, you can just kind of see a starting point of where research funding was at that time. So a lot of focus was on children, a lot of focus was on animal studies. Not many studies had autistic people with extra things. So autistic learning disabilities, or autistic people who are minimally verbal, for example. And not many studies had that many people involved. So 7 studies of the ones which were taking part in that review actually didn't involve any autistic people in any stage of the study. So that was kind of our starting point. So this is our insight group. So our insight group is what we call our PPI group, because they provide insight for us. So this is a quote from a member of our insight group, who say that they joined the insight group because they wanted autistic people to be able to share their voice even if the autistic person isn't able to speak themselves. And that'd be from a parent of a non-verbal child who kind of acts as their representative in the insight group. So who do we work with in our insight group? About 65% of our insight group are autistic. So we ask for autistic people, parents and carers of autistic people to get involved. And there's quite a lot of overlap. So the grey box in front of you shows kind of about a third of our insight group are both parents and autistic themselves, which is really crucial because I think there's in the past not that much overlap between those two groups. Additionally, we've got asked information and people have said we've got 30% who identify as LGBTQIA+, 20% identifies BAME, 45% of the insight group have co-occurring conditions, and I'll talk about a bit why that's important later. Hang on, I'm losing my filters. So other common co-occurring conditions can be mental health, like depression, anxiety. They can be sleep disorders, epilepsy. We've worked with epilepsy research before. ADHD, it can really vary, but it is quite common to have more other conditions as well as autistic. And we also have many who are quite vulnerable people, or people who generally across research, not just autism research, are generally quite unheard. So whether that's people who are on benefits, unemployed, homeless, prison population, all of these groups are kind of people we're trying to bring into our insight group. So how do we work with our insight group? A big, obviously, which is why I'm here, a big way we work with the insight group is to get research to be inclusive. So we got a quote there from a member, a researcher who used our insight group, and to say that they found it really useful and, which is great, use the insight group to review the language in a survey they were putting out for their research, and they wanted to make sure that language was respectful and that the content of the survey was relevant as possible. So we have these survey that anyone who wants to use any of our kind of people networks that we have at Autistica fill in this one survey, and it kind of asks them why it's a priority, how they want to involve community members, and what they want to do. And as well as our insight group, we have our network, which is a kind of recruitment network, so getting participants in research. We have our study groups. We take part in international research summits, which are mixed groups, professionals, researchers, autistic people. And we also have autistic people in different steering committees, our research grant board, all of that. So it's built into everything we do, is as inclusive of autistic voices as it can be. And here is a very fancy flow diagram, which just demonstrates kind of the average process of a PPI opportunity that might come into us. So researcher will fill out the form that was on the last slide, saying they kind of want to work with our insight group, want autistic feedback on their study. If it kind of fits just about, looks like the right kind of thing, they'll go into consultation phase where I talk to them, get a bit more information out of them, and work alongside the researcher to work out the best way to go forward and to have this involvement. Once we've decided that, there's a recruitment stage where we get the autistic people kind of signed up to take part. And there's generally, well, I say there's 3 types of involvement, there's probably hundreds of types of involvement, but 3 core types of involvement. So there's kind of online, a review of materials, or of a survey or something like that, which is done mostly via email and online consultation. Focus groups or workshops at the moment, they're also online completely. But obviously before, those could have been online or could have been in face-to-face or in person. And these can vary from 2-day intense workshops to 1 hour, 5 people chatting about a subject. And then finally, steering groups or advisory boards. And this is where it's long-term involvement. So the autistic person or family member would sit throughout the lifespan of a study and involve in feedback into it at different stages. And then once the autistic person does whatever the opportunity is, a really crucial part of it is follow-up. So this can vary from making sure their involvement fees are paid for. So this is kind of paying back for their time as experts, reimbursing them for the work that they've done, making sure that sort of safeguarding wise and emotionally, they're happy with what they've gone through, that any kind of subjects that have gone up, they're comfortable with, and crucially, anything they've kind of gone away from the meeting and thought of afterwards. We always kind of use it as a safety net to collect the last kind of bits of thinking, because it happens to us all. So really quickly, other areas we work with our insight group. So as well as research, we work in comms, we feed into the comms people, and that can be kind of how we work. So COVID, we fed in there, instructions, how we talk to people there. They are involved in our strategy as a charity. So we involve we've held workshops to include people there. We've encouraged them to apply for jobs at Autistica. We make sure autistic voices are heard at all of our events. And as I talked about before, consult on research priorities throughout, as well as a big version we did with John Lind. We have top-ups there. And finally, barriers to involve. So hopefully you can see me okay, because my internet connection is unstable, apparently. But really quickly, when working with a group of people, like autistic people, you might find that it's not as simple as just putting them in touch with a researcher. There's barriers to why they might find it difficult, and it's important to think of ways to go around that barriers. And they might not always be difficult to do. So some of the ways here, we have had facilitation training, mental health first aid training. If we're ever doing face-to-face, we have photo guides, we have recaps information on communications with them. We'd use post-it notes and meetings with people. They have a way of communicating which isn't always verbal. Different communication badges. All these small steps are just one way easier to make it for people to take part in involvement in research. Yep, and that's me done. Thank you very much.
Bethan, thank you so much for that, and for giving us those insights into how PPI has worked for you and for Autistica. That's extremely valuable. Thank you so much, and thank you to all our speakers this afternoon. I think the speakers are now going to rejoin us for a few questions that have come in from stakeholders here, from within Epilepsy Research UK and from viewers. So all of our panelists, if you don't mind, I'm going to ask a few questions. And I wondered if I could start with Emma and Daisy. We ask all of our SHAPE network members this question. So for you, what has been the main way that epilepsy has interrupted your lives? Maybe if we could start with Emma, if you can come back online for that, please.
Thanks, Andrew. I think because our daughter was diagnosed when she was 3, she's very young, it kind of was a big life change really for the whole family. But I think for me personally, it's that I haven't been able to work full time for over a decade, which has obviously meant that life plans had to change dramatically. That's the biggest one for me.
Daisy, could we get your insight into this question, how epilepsy has interrupted your life? If you could tell us about that, please.
Yep, so I was diagnosed when I was 10, so I kind of remember what it's like being like a normal kid as such. I know that's not the right word, but I remember not having seizures, and I remember my life before. So going to that loss of independence where I was never home alone, I was always having like supervised baths and showers and things. I think because I remember before, the independence was a big thing for me.
Yeah, I can absolutely imagine that. And Amy, if I can bring you in here as well, from your perspective as a researcher, and also in your professional capacity as an assistant psychologist, what have you seen as the main ways that epilepsy interrupts people's lives?
Yeah, so I guess the MICE project is working on children with epilepsy who also have a mental health condition. So I see the impact, the mental health impact being one of a huge thing for young people with epilepsy. Frequently kind of behavioural difficulties and how that impacts on family life, but also kind of low mood and anxiety around sort of seizures and hospital appointments and things like that. That's the thing that I hear about the most, I suppose. But also I think that there's been a lot of sort of talk about children missing school at the moment with the pandemic. And I think that that's a huge thing that we hear about, that's just a normal part of day-to-day life for young people with epilepsy, is kind of going to hospital appointments, missing school. I think that's a big thing as well.
Thank you, Amy. Well, going back to PPI, it's been fascinating to hear from you all about the many ways in which you're involved in research. And maybe I could ask Beck this one first, but how has the COVID-19 pandemic interrupted patient and public involvement? With everything being virtual these days, including this webinar, of course, have there actually been some benefits? Maybe, as I say, Beck, if you could come online first and talk about that.
Yeah, it's really interesting. When the pandemic really got going in this country, there was a huge reduction in involvement. So lots of researchers just stopped involving people. And there was a lot of concern about that and a lot of anger, because in a way it's a time to involve people more when there's more interest in research and more people are realizing how important it is. That has really changed now. So we're back up at the levels that we were at before the pandemic started. But most people are, as everybody's been saying, they're involved online. That means for some people that's brilliant. They've been able to get involved more easily because they can access involvement activities via the internet. For some people, it's no longer possible for them to be involved. So people who don't have easy access to Wi-Fi, people who are living in poverty, for them it is much, much harder to stay involved. So it's been a mixed picture, but certainly things are looking a lot better than they were.
Are there things that you can learn from this period that you might be able to take forward into not post-pandemic, because I think, you know, COVID's possibly with us in some form or another for a while, but a world where we're getting back to normal?
Well, we're all learning how to use Zoom, aren't we? I mean, it's
Yes.
there's going to be a lot more activities that will continue to happen online, and that will save particularly charities a lot of money. Before the pandemic, lots of charities were paying travel expenses for people to come to London or Birmingham or Edinburgh or Belfast for meetings, and I think a lot of stuff will stay online, but I really hope not all of it will, because online doesn't suit everybody, and sometimes it's just great to meet face to face, isn't it?
Absolutely. Bethan, what's been your perspective at Autistica on this? How the pandemic has interrupted PPI efforts?
Much like Beck said, I think we had 3 months, kind of April to May, June, where we just had absolutely nothing come through for those months. And the ones we had outstanding or had to kind of pause, because even the research that was going ahead and wasn't paused properly had to kind of rethink how to take part, how to involve people. So definitely had a while to kind of catch up. Now people are kind of more used to this. I think there's a lot we do gain from being online. There's a lot of ways it's more inclusive, especially for autistic people. But we are very aware that we have members of our Insight group, for example, that we haven't heard from since March because they don't have access to computers. They use their library computers, for example. So we can't really say it's better for everyone, because it's better for those with access. For those without, it's definitely much worse in a way. And I think, like Beck said, we do, even autistic people, we miss having that contact face to face, talking to other people, getting to know other people. That comes to having an in-face meeting. Zoom, however kind of sociable it is, however informal it is, there's always much harder to have that kind of chat next with the person next to you. And I think, you know, autistic people, family members really miss talking to others in similar situations.
Emma, I'd love to get your thoughts on this as well, as somebody who's been involved from your sort of angle on PPI, how it's been during the pandemic and how things have changed, and what maybe some of the benefits and positives we can take from this time might be in terms of PPI and research.
I think, you know, I echo what everybody has said, and in our particular project, I mentioned it when I was talking, you know, a big challenge has been we haven't been able to really meet the needs of our young people properly. It's very difficult, you know, and a lot of the things that we're discussing in the adult group, as it were, it can feel like the young people are being talked about, which is obviously not what we want to have happen at all. And so, yeah, because of people being in their homes, and often when you are involved in research and you are a carer, it's difficult to have somebody come and look after your children, even when it isn't a pandemic. You know, during a pandemic, it becomes almost impossible. So that's definitely a tricky element. But something that is positive, you know, Daisy mentioned it, is the accessibility. So for the group members who couldn't easily get into London, being able to dial in makes such a huge difference. And I think something that we could maybe take forward is more of a blended approach. So for those people that need the face-to-face, or for whom that's easy, we can do that, but there's no reason why we can't also Zoom. So, you know, that's something to consider, I think.
Thank you. Amy, turning to you, we know that in the mice study, you try your hardest to include PPI at all stages of the research. Do you have any advice for other researchers who might be watching this now, on how to involve PPI across the whole research project, from inception to dissemination?
Yeah, so I think the simple answer is consultation. So going to patients and public and asking them for their advice on the best way to engage and you know, form a really good solid PPI group. I think that would be kind of step one, like the most important step. We've just found it incredible. I think we've demonstrated that when, I think Emma mentioned that we were sort of struggling with recruitment when the pandemic hit, and the best thing to do there was to ask the people we were trying to recruit. So to say, how can we reach you? How's the best way to kind of reach out to these people? So I guess I can only speak from my experience on the trial, but I think it's really important to consider barriers that might come up. So if you want to involve patients and public in things like conducting interviews, you know, collecting the data and things like that, you need to think about contracts, you know, really dull stuff, but all of that stuff is really important to think about kind of way in advance. So I guess planning is my number one tip for things like that. And yeah, and I guess also planning with if you've got a PPI group sort of set up, kind of don't always assume that they've got all the time in the world for this project. Just make sure you're planning in advance and sort of asking, you know, are you interested in helping write on this paper, and then sort of making a clear plan and sort of, you know, planning is my answer.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Beck, I'm interested in your thoughts on this as well, about how you get PPI a part of research at all stages.
I think what Amy said about getting the foundations in place is really important, actually. Another thing I'd say is start as early as you can. So if you are thinking about doing some research, get people involved at that early stage. But if you are coming towards the end of a project, it's not too late. So start as early as you can, but it's never too late. And the other thing I would say is, as well as what Amy's saying about talk to the people affected by the condition, if there is a charity or a community group supporting people with the condition that you're researching, I think it's really valuable to talk to them. So for example, for autistic people, if you're wanting to study anything to do with autism, I just think Autistica is really helpful to researchers. There's a question in the chat about it, I noticed, and it is that charities can often advise researchers about people's access needs or support needs, and make sure that people have a good experience in the process, which is really, really important.
Thank you. Actually, question for Daisy, if you can, if you're there. Which part of the research process have you actually enjoyed being involved in the PPI that you've taken part in?
I think just seeing everything like behind the scenes. So I have like a more personal perspective, but seeing, like, I know what living with epilepsy is like, but seeing the other side of the research, I think it's really interesting, as it's completely different.
Yeah, you get that perspective. It must be very valuable, actually. And Emma, a similar question to you. What have you really enjoyed here? Give us some sort of, the positive sides of this, beyond, obviously the positives of how you're helping with the research.
I think, as a parent or an individual, receiving a diagnosis is hugely life-changing, especially for an acute chronic condition that's going to be with you forever. And being involved in research, for me at least, and I think for the members of the group, is a way to actually make a difference. It's an action. So there's a lot of support out there, or not, but there are some support groups, and that's lovely, and it's great to have that peer support. But being involved in research for me there's a possibility that change will come about because of it, and so that's really important for me.
Thank you. Sorry, you cut out from my point of view slightly there, but I think others probably heard you. Thank you so much. Question really here. I've got a question coming in from the audience as well. And I would like to turn to Beck first for this one. What would be your advice for someone thinking about getting involved in research? And somebody's written in from Facebook to ask how they can recruit their daughter into participating in research. She has a complex epilepsy within the Lennox-Gastaut syndrome, and is 5 years old, and it's been nearly 3 years since her diagnosis. Beck, can I turn to you first?
Yeah, I mean, I may not be the best person to answer this, but I would say the first port of call is always like your clinician. So I don't know if she sees a doctor regularly, but I would say talk to the clinician, but also talk to the relevant charity. So either talk to Akanksha or talk to Epilepsy Research UK about that.
Yeah. Amy, do you have any thoughts on that from your side? How people who are interested can get involved?
Yeah, I was just to add to that. I think I was just going to say, I think we know from Daisy's experience, sometimes you need to be in the NHS trust that's offering that research. If it's NHS led research, that I would go onto your local trust's website and have a look. They've normally got sort of details of any research that's currently going. So I would do that as well.
Thank you. Bethan, when people approach, this is another question that's come in from the audience, but when people approach the Insight group for feedback, how do you manage the relationship between the researchers and the patients? In other words, to make sure, for example, that meetings are productive. Could I ask you that, Bethan, just as a last question here?
Yeah, of course. So we've got different ways we do this. One way is, I think I mentioned really briefly, is having autistic staff members present. So as much as I can, I am like the sole contact for the Insight group to researchers. And so they have kind of a single point of contact if they've got questions. And ideally, so they kind of more or less know my face, know my name. So when we do have a focus group or a session, they kind of hopefully feel comfortable kind of asking questions they do need to ask, and kind of making sure they've got the information they know. We also follow kind of similar structures from events to events. So for example, we always have introductions at the start, because we find that people kind of do want to share their life story, and not we get it over and done with, but it also just helps kind of knowing who you're talking to. Trying to think of other ways. But those are kind of the main bits, having kind of a simple person, one person kind of in between, I would say probably is the best way we do work, at least.
Thank you. Well, that's really valuable advice, and thank you to you, Beth, and thank you, in fact, to all of our speakers this afternoon, to Akansha, Emma, Daisy, Amy, Beck, and Bethan again. Thank you so much for sharing your work with us. It's been really fascinating for me to listen to. I'm sorry I wasn't on camera this afternoon. I've just a problem with the camera on my computer here. But anyway, thank you to James, obviously today, for ensuring all of the tech has run smoothly. We very much look forward to welcoming you to our next webinar. If you aren't already, make sure you do sign up to our newsletter to ensure you hear about those upcoming webinars. And of course, all the information about today's webinar and what you need to know to get involved and to sign up and so on will be made available from Epilepsy Research UK. Thank you again to all our panelists. Thank you to all of you for joining us this afternoon, and goodbye.